A year has passed. The mansion is now cozy and bright. Amy studies with tutors and runs around the garden. Mia helps with the library and tends to the flowers. In the evenings, they all dine together and watch movies. Young-ho sees that they are happy. Everything is going perfectly. But gradually, he notices details. Mia calmly picks up expensive dishes without looking at them. Amy, having received a new toy, quickly loses interest in it. They've become accustomed to luxury. It's become ordinary for them. One day, Mia accidentally breaks an antique crystal vase. She simply says, "Ouch!" and calls the maid. Her expression expresses annoyance, but not fear. Previously, she would have been afraid of ruining something in his house. Now she feels completely in charge. Jung-ho watches. He's given them everything. Safety, comfort, peace. But he's starting to doubt it. Do they value it? Or do they simply take it for granted? Are they staying here only for these comforts? His thoughts haunt him. He needs to be sure that they are with him because they love him, not his house and money. That they will choose him, even if all of that is gone. An old pain from the past whispers to him, happiness that isn't appreciated can disappear. He, a man who always controls risks, wants guarantees. He needs a test, a harsh one, but clear. He decides to take from them everything they gave and see what's left. The thought doesn't immediately form in his head. It comes piece by piece, like a puzzle. At first, it's just a troubling question. What if? Then comes a cold, analytical look at the situation. He's used to checking everything and everyone. Business partners, schemes, security. But how can he check all of this? How can he check his feelings? One night, looking at Mia sleeping, he understands. The only way is to take away everything he gave. Not forever, of course. It will be a performance, a harsh, painful test of strength. He needs to see their true faces when there is no mansion, no servants, no money, when only he remains, the man who supposedly lost everything. The plan seems logical to him, even necessary. If they endure, get through this, and stay close, then his doubts were unfounded. Then they're his. If not, better to find out the fix now than live in false confidence. The thought of a possible negative outcome makes him cringe inside, but he pushes it away. He must know. He must control this variable too. In the morning, he summons Jin-woo to his office. His right-hand man enters, expecting the usual instructions about business, transportation, and meetings. "Close the door," says Jung-ho. His tone makes Jin-woo wary. Jung-ho is silent for a few seconds, gathering his thoughts. Then he begins speaking clearly, without emotion, as if setting a combat mission. "Starting today, Operation Zeroing begins. You must create the appearance of complete collapse. Spread rumors in our circles that I've lost a major deal, that I'm under pressure from competitors and the authorities, that my assets have been seized, my channels cut off. Let everyone think I'm a lost cause." Jin-woo stares at him, disbelieving. His face is a mask of professionalism, but confusion flickers in his eyes. "Boss, I don't understand. Is this a strategic move? To expose the traitors?" "No," Jung-ho snaps. "This is a personal test, just for Mia and Amy. They mustn't suspect any deception. Everything must look completely real." Now Jin-woo understands. His gaze grows heavy. He's seen how his boss has changed over the past year, how he's thawed, and now he hears in his voice, not business acumen, but a personal, almost painful need. "And then what?" Jin-woo asks quietly. "Next, we lose the mansion. We need an apartment, the most basic, even repulsive one, in an old building, in a poor neighborhood, without renovations. You will find a suitable one and organize the move. All things remain here. They will take only the most necessary personal belongings. The servants will be fired. Dr. Kim will disappear. Only you will remain in contact. But your position must also seem precarious. Is everything clear?" Jin-woo nods slowly. He doesn't like this game. It smells like big trouble, but orders are orders. "Understood, boss. When do we start?" "Right now." Jung-ho chooses a moment after dinner. They're sitting in the living room. Amy is coloring a book. Mia is leafing through a gardening magazine. The wood is crackling in the fireplace. It's idyllic. He stands up. His movement catches their attention. Mia looks at him with a smile, but it fades when she sees his face. It's stony, drawn by the day. His eyes stare into space. "I need to talk to you," he says. His voice is dull, lifeless. Something irreparable has happened. Amy puts down her marker. Mia slowly closes her journal. Something wrong with business? She asks cautiously. Jung-ho pretends to struggle to find the words. He lowers his gaze. It's over. It's over. The big deal fell through. The competitors proved stronger. They destroyed me. The assets are frozen. The debts. This house, it's not ours anymore. It'll be foreclosed on in a few days. A deathly silence falls over the room. Even the fireplace seems to fall silent. What? What are you saying? Mia whispers. Her face turns white. I've lost everything, he repeats, looking straight at her now. His eyes reflect the deliberate emptiness of a broken man. We have nothing left. Only debt and shame. Amy looks between her mother and Jung-ho, not fully understanding, but feeling the icy terror in the air. Are we going to be kicked out? From our home? Her voice trembled. Jung-ho nods, clenching his jaw. Yes, but I have an option. One place. An apartment. It's not the best, but that's all I can offer right now. We'll have to move there. Tomorrow. And live differently, without help, without all this. He gestures around the luxurious living room. Mia sits, frozen. She looks at him, trying to read even a hint of deception, a joke, in his eyes, but she sees only despair, the same despair that was once in her own eyes. Are you sure? There's no other way out? Her voice is weak. No, he snaps. There's only one way out, starting from scratch. If you're ready to come with me. He delivers the last sentence with a piercing voice, putting the full meaning of his test into it. Are you ready? Mia closes her eyes for a second, then opens them. There's no longer panic in them. There's shock, pain, but somewhere deep down, determination. She reaches out to Amy and hugs her. We're coming with you, she says firmly, looking at Jung-ho. We're family. Families don't abandon us in times of need. Amy snuggles into her mother's arms and nods, her eyes filled with tears, but she's not crying. We'll be together, Uncle Jung-ho. Everything will be okay. At that moment, Jung-ho feels a sharp stab of shame. Their reaction, direct, pure and true, is spot on, but the wheel of testing has been set in motion. It can no longer be stopped. He can only nod, speechless, and leave the room, leaving them in what they perceive as a shattered world. His performance has begun. After Chung-ho left, silence fell over the living room, thick, oppressive, broken only by the crackling of the logs in the fireplace. Amy sat huddled against her mother, her eyes wide. She didn't yet fully understand what it meant to lose everything, but Chung-ho's tone and her mother's pale face told her something terrible and real had happened. Mia didn't move. She stared at the spot where he had just stood. Her mind, unused to catastrophe, slowly, reluctantly processed the information. Lost everything. The house will be taken. Debts. The words echoed dully in her head. A year of life, calm, clear, safe, had crumbled to dust in a single minute. It wasn't fear for herself that raged through her first. It was a sharp, piercing pity for him. She saw how broken he was, how the steely confidence that had held him together had vanished. He stood before them, devastated, pleading, and this hurt her more than any thought of poverty. She hugged Amy tighter. "Mom, are they really going to kick us out?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. Mia forced herself to take a breath. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Her daughter looked at her, seeking support. "They won't kick us out. We'll leave on our own," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "Remember our old apartment? We lived there together, and everything was fine. It will be hard, but we'll get through this. The main thing is that we're together. And Uncle Jung-ho is with us." She said this, convincing both her daughter and herself. The shock slowly receded, giving way to an old, familiar feeling, the need to act, to survive. Only now she had not just Amy, but two to care for. Him, broken and lost. First and foremost. The next morning, the mansion was empty. There was no bustle of servants, no smell of coffee from the kitchen. Jin-woo arrived in a simple, battered car. His face was grim, and he avoided Jung-ho's eyes, playing his part as the disillusioned assistant whose career had collapsed along with his boss's empire. There were few belongings, 3 small bags containing the most essential clothes, a few of Amy's favorite toys, packed by Mia, and a black jewelry box containing a jade hairpin, which she had shoved to the very bottom. Everything else, dresses, books, expensive trinkets, was left in the closets, evidence of a past life. The ride was silent. Jong-ho sat in the front seat, hunched over, staring out the window. Mia and Amy were in the back. The girl grew quiet, watching as the familiar upscale neighborhoods gave way to more ordinary ones, and then disappeared completely beyond the window. Old houses with peeling paint, fences with garish graffiti, and people in simple clothes appeared. The car stopped in front of a 5-story gray brick building. The front door was scratched, one pane cracked. Jin-woo, without looking at them, handed Jong-ho a key and an envelope containing some papers. "All I could do, boss," he muttered. "From now on, it's up to you." And he drove off, leaving the three of them on the sidewalk in front of the unfamiliar, unwelcoming entrance. The smell hit her nose even on the landing, a mixture of old dust, musty dampness, cheap tobacco, and something sour, perhaps rotting garbage. Amy pressed her palm to her nose. Mia only inhaled deeper, remembering the entrance to her old building. It smelled exactly like that. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. The door creaked open. The first thing they saw was dirt, a sticky layer of dust on the hallway floor, streaks of dirty water on the linoleum in the kitchen. The wallpaper, a small yellow flower pattern, was peeling, and mold stains were visible here and there. The air was stale and cold, despite the summer day outside. Jong-ho entered first, pretending to survey his new domain, his insides clenched with disgust and shame. He'd prepared this cage himself, but the reality was even worse than he'd imagined from Jin-woo's description. Mia paused in the doorway, leading Amy by the hand. Her gaze slid over the rusty kitchen sink, the battered table with its broken leg, and the single, stained window through which light barely filtered. Her heart sank. This wasn't just poverty. This was squalor, the complete opposite of the bright, clean, safe world she'd grown to love. Amy finally couldn't take it anymore. "Ugh, Mom, it smells bad in here," she said, quietly. "And it's dirty. I don't want to live here." Chon-ho turned around, ready to see the same despair on Mia's face, the same plea to run away from here, wherever her eyes could take her. But her face was different. It was focused. She looked from the dirty walls to her daughter, then back to him. There were no tears in her eyes. There was a tired, yet firm determination. "Yes, it's dirty," she agreed with Amy in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. "So the first thing we need to do is clean, and then it'll get better. Remember, our old apartment didn't seem so great at first either, right?" She stepped forward, crossing the threshold. Her shoes creaked on the sticky floor. She looked around like a commander assessing the upcoming battlefield, not against him, but with him, against this filth, this desolation. This first step into the mud was more important to Jong-ho than any words. It was the first unexpected response to his brutal test. Jong-ho froze, expecting an explosion, expecting Mia to turn to him with tears or reproach in her eyes, expecting her to say, "I can't live here," or "How could you let all this happen?" He braced himself for it, bracing himself for a blow. But the blow didn't land. Mia simply sighed deeply, lifted her chin, and glanced around the apartment again, not with despair this time, but with a cold assessment. "Well then," she said, quietly but clearly, "I see. It's dirty, cold, and uncomfortable here. So we need to make it clean, warm, and cozy. Let's figure it out." These words sounded not like resignation to fate, but like a command to herself, a command to act. There was not a hint of panic in her tone. There was a tired but iron determination that Jong-ho remembered from their first conversation in the mansion, when she had negotiated the terms. Only now this determination was directed not at him, but at the circumstances that she thought had broken him. He looked at her, and for the first time in this entire adventure, something sharp and vivid stabbed him. Not shame, but shock. He'd expected weakness, but saw strength. He'd expected complaints, but heard a plan of action. Amy, still wrinkling her nose from the smell, looked at her mother. She saw her standing up straight, not crying, and it gave her confidence. Fear receded, giving way to curiosity and a desire to help. "Mom, where's my room?" she asked. Mia put an arm around her shoulders. "For now, we only have one room, a big one, and the three of us need to make it nice. Will you help?" Amy nodded seriously. She set her small backpack of toys on the floor, unzipped it, and began carefully removing its contents. A battered Yuri teddy bear, a couple of books, a box of pencils. She didn't scatter them, but stacked them in a relatively clean corner of the floor, as if marking her place. Yuri isn't afraid, she said, sitting the teddy bear with his back to the dirty wall, as if blocking his view of the mess. He's lived in a small house before. He'll help me clean. Chung Ho watched this simple childhood ritual. Amy didn't whine, didn't ask to go back. She'd adapted. Her world had shrunk to this dingy corner, Jong Ho's mother and uncle, and in this small world, she immediately began to restore order. She didn't take the most expensive toys from the mansion, but the most beloved, the oldest. And in this was an important, quiet answer. She brought with her not a habit of luxury, but a habit of love. Mia slipped the thin gold watch from her wrist, a gift from Young Ho last Christmas, and carefully placed it in her bag. Then she slipped a simple ring off her finger. She didn't toss it aside with disdain, but simply put it away, as one might put away fragile objects before a difficult task. Then she rolled up the sleeves of her simple sweater above her elbows. Her movements were economical. Quick, Young Ho, she addressed him as an ally. See if there's a bucket or basin in the bathroom. And rags, anything. Amy, let's open all the windows. We need to air out the room to get the smell out. She didn't expect him to stand there. She engaged him as an equal, sharing the responsibilities. Dazed, he mechanically walked toward what looked like a bathroom and found a rusty bucket and a dry, stiff rag. When he returned, Mia had already opened the kitchen's only window, struggling to push the jammed frame aside. Fresh air, scented with asphalt and a distant exhaust pipe, rushed into the room, mingling with the mustiness. She took the bucket from him, filled it with cold water from the kitchen tap. There was no hot water, of course, and dipped a rag in. First, let's just wash off the main layer of dust from everything we can reach, she said, thinking mostly out loud. Then we'll think about it further. And she began. She didn't stand in one place, sighing mournfully. She moved. She wiped the windowsill, brushed cobwebs from the corner, and wiped the rough kitchen table. The water in the bucket quickly turned black. Amy, taking a clean handkerchief like a small rag, diligently wiped dust from the chair legs. Jong Ho stood and watched. His test was turning into something else. He'd wanted to see their weakness, but he'd witnessed their resilience. Mia, wiping sweat from her brow with a dirty hand, dressed in simple clothes in a shabby apartment, seemed stronger and more beautiful to him at that moment than she ever had in the silks and diamonds of the mansion's ballroom. She wasn't fighting her circumstances. She was simply taking control. And there was more dignity in that than he could have imagined. His cruel game was beginning to turn against him, revealing not their flaws, but their incredible, terrifyingly sincere value. And the feeling of shame in his chest grew heavy and hot, like a red-hot coal. Jong Ho doesn't join in right away. He stands, leaning against the doorframe, watching. He's waiting for a breakdown to occur. For Mia, having washed every 10th square meter of the dirty floor, to suddenly squat down and cry from exhaustion. For Amy to start acting up, to say she's tired, to want to go home to her toys. But that doesn't happen. A strange, concentrated calm reigns in the tiny, dingy apartment. Mia works methodically, without fuss. She doesn't scold her circumstances or complain. She simply does what needs to be done. Amy, imitating her mother, diligently dusts, and then begins arranging her few belongings on the windowsill, making it her own. There's barely a word between them. Sometimes Mia says, "Let me help," or "Good job, that's clean." Sometimes Amy asks, "Mom, should I wash this?" They act like a team, a well-oiled machine that suddenly kicks into gear after a long period of inactivity. There's no joy in it, but there's no despair either. There's fatigue, but there's also perseverance. And Jong Ho finds himself thinking that this image, mother and daughter struggling with the filth in a squalid apartment, inspires in him not pity, but a bitter, aching respect. They don't look at him reproachfully, don't expect him to do anything. They simply do it, without him. And in this, without him, lies a new, unexpected sting for him. They cope. His test shows that they are stronger than he thought, stronger than he perhaps would have liked to see. After a couple of hours, the most obvious dirt had been vanquished. The floor glistened with wet streaks, but was no longer sticky. The dust had disappeared from the surfaces. The air, though still stale, was no longer so close. Mia straightened, placed her hands on her hips, and surveyed the results. "Okay, that's enough for today. Now we need to think about the household," she said practically. "Young Ho, you'll need to go to the store. buy the essentials. Food, bread, milk, a couple more rags, and some basic cleaning supplies. I'll make a list, Amy. You're responsible for keeping the windowsill tidy. That's your zone now. And for keeping the table clear of junk. I'll take care of the kitchen and see if I can figure out how to fix this stove. She spoke as if they'd always lived this way. She divided responsibilities, planned, and took charge. Her tone wasn't commanding, but it carried the confidence of someone who knew how to organize survival. She didn't ask, "Can you go to the store?" She said, "You'll need to go," assuming he was the part of this new mechanism, and his contribution was just as necessary. Jong-ho nodded silently. His role as the broken one made it difficult for him to speak, but he took the piece of paper with the short list from her hands. Simple words: bread, pasta, eggs, salt. The world narrowed to these concepts, and it was frighteningly simple. The apartment smelled different that evening. The damp and moldy odor had receded, overshadowed by the smell of boiling water and burnt oil. Mia, finding her way to the fickle stove, cooked some pasta and fried a few eggs. The food was simple to the point of tastelessness, but hot. They sat at the same shabby table that Mia had scrubbed until the wood was pale. The plates were different, bought at the nearest cheap store down the road. The glass cups had been replaced with plastic ones. Jung-ho silently picked at his plate with his fork, watching them. Amy ate heartily, tired from the day. "Delicious, Mom," she said, and her words rang with complete sincerity. For her, this truly was a long-awaited dinner after a hard day's work. Mia smiled at her, then glanced at Jung-ho. Her smile became softer, encouraging. "Eat," she told him quietly. "It's just food, but it will give you strength. Tomorrow is a new day, and we'll do something else." He took a bite of fried egg. The food was bland, but in the context of this day, their labor, their silent acceptance, it seemed significant. They sat at a clean table, in a relatively clean room, and ate together. There was a strange, primitive comfort in it. A comfort created not by money, but by their own hands. Chung-ho understood that his plan was working exactly the opposite. He wanted to see them yearn for luxury. Instead, he saw them create comfort out of nothing. He tested their dependence on comfort, and they demonstrated complete independence. They passed his test with such a vengeance that he himself began to feel not like the director of this play, but the only spectator who hadn't understood the essence of the performance. And this spectator felt not pride in a successful test, but a growing dull sense of his own wrongness. Before bed, Amy, already clean and tired, put on her simple pajamas and looked at Jung-ho. There was a silent question in her eyes, one he read without words. Ritual. Ritual was important. It maintained a reality in which everything could still be normal. At the mansion, he read to her, sitting in a deep leather chair. The only chair in their shared room was a creaky wooden chair with a hard seat. Jung-ho pulled it to the edge of the mattress that served as Amy's bed and sat down. The chair creaked pitifully under his weight. He didn't have a beautiful picture book with him. He had only a small, tattered fairy tale book that Amy had taken from the mansion herself, one of the very first he had read to her. He opened it under the dim light of the bare ceiling bulb. His voice, initially tense and unnatural in this setting, gradually found its rhythm. He was reading the same story about the rabbit, the same even, slightly monotonous tone, but now there was none of the former stiffness. There was weariness, but also a new, bitter tenderness. He read, sitting on a creaky chair in a poor room, and this act of fidelity to habit, faithfulness to it, was stronger than any beautiful fairy tale in a luxurious library. Amy listened, settling in comfortably, and her eyes slowly closed. Not from boredom, but from a familiar, reassuring sense of security that emanated not from the setting, but from himself. That night, Jong-ho lay on his mattress on the floor, pretending to be asleep. He heard Amy tossing and turning. "Mommy?" the girl called softly. "I'm here, baby," Mia whispered back. "Can't sleep? I dreamed of our big room and the garden with the swing." Amy's voice trembled. Jong-ho froze, expecting tears to follow, a night of longing for what was lost. His heart sank. Mia sighed softly in the darkness. There was a rustling sound. She must have hugged her daughter. "I know. I dream about it sometimes too," she admitted honestly. "It was a beautiful life. But Amy, listen. The garden and the swing are just a place and things. They can be lost. But what's truly important, and what won't go anywhere, is that we are together, and that Uncle Jong-ho is with us. You see, even here, on that creaky chair, he reads to you before bed, because we are his family, and family is what matters most. Everything else, we will survive, together." In the silence of the room, her words rang out softly, yet incredibly firmly. This wasn't a child's comforting fairy tale. It was a statement of her inner faith. She didn't say, "He'll come back," or "We must be patient." She said, "We are the most important thing, and we will survive the rest." There was not a shadow of doubt in her voice. Amy paused, considering. "So, are we like the Three Musketeers now? One for all and all for one?" she asked, her voice more cheerful. Mia laughed softly. "Yes, that's right. 3 musketeers in one room. Now go to sleep, musketeer." Jong-ho lay with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, where the streetlight's shadows danced. The lump in his throat was so tight, it was hard to breathe. Their conversation, those whispers in the darkness, was stronger than any day of his testing. They weren't clinging to the past. They were building a new reality, where the core, the most precious thing, was their relationship. His testing was turning against him with triple force, revealing the purity of what he already had and the filth of his own doubt. The week flew by in a difficult, monotonous routine. They lived according to a new, rigid schedule. Mia learned to cook 3 simple dishes on the capricious stove. Jung-ho, playing his part, went to work. In reality, he spent time in cheap cafes, pondering his situation, sinking deeper and deeper into shame. He brought in a little money, supposedly from day labor, but what struck him most was the atmosphere in the apartment. It wasn't gloomy or oppressive. After the first few days of struggling with the dirt, a strange, bright normality had taken hold. Mia bought the cheapest wildflowers at the market and placed them in a glass jar on the table. This simple gesture transformed the room. Amy, having settled in, found joy in small things. She drew pictures and pasted them on the wall to decorate the room. She played long role-playing games with Yuri on the mattress. She laughed when Mia messed up something in the kitchen, and they fixed it together. In the evenings, after dinner, they sometimes played cards or simply talked. The conversations became different, simpler, and deeper at the same time. Without the background noise of luxury, without the distance of large rooms, they became closer, physically and, what was even more frightening for Chung-ho, spiritually. He watched Mia hum as she hand-washed their modest clothes in the sink. He watched Amy teach him how to properly mop the floor without leaving streaks. They weren't just surviving, they were living. And in this life, stripped of all appearances, there was a core of peace and understanding that was missing even on the quietest days in the mansion. His test failed brilliantly. They showed that their spirit was not broken by circumstances, that their happiness depended not on the interior, but on each other. And this discovery brought him no relief. It brought a painful understanding of the monstrous game he had played with people who had already given him their trust. He began testing them to verify their feelings. Now he was absolutely certain of them, and this certainty became his punishment. 10 days passed. Jong-ho no longer doubted their strength. He saw it every day in Mia's calm eyes, in Amy's smile, in the way they transformed a squalid cage into a semblance of home. Their spirit was stronger than steel. They proved they weren't dependent on things, that they would stand by him through thick and thin, and that should have been enough. His mind screamed at him to stop, to confess, to give them everything back, and never look at them again in shame. But the old, dark part of his nature, the one used to examining everything to the very bottom, wouldn't let up. It whispered, what if they're only staying out of pity, out of a sense of duty? What if they simply have nowhere else to go? He needed one final, decisive test, not of their willpower, but of the sincerity of their choice. He needed to give them a real alternative, a bright, tempting escape route from this poverty back to luxury, but without him. If they refused this too, then he would be absolutely 100% sure. He decided to stage the final act of his cruel play. The risk was enormous. If they suspected deception, he could lose them forever. But the idea of complete control over the situation, a complete guarantee, was too sweet to refuse. He called Jin Woo and gave new orders. A couple of days later, in the afternoon, a car pulled up to their house. Not just any car, but a long, shiny, silver-colored foreign car. It looked completely out of place against the peeling facades and old, broken sidewalks. The windows were tinted. The engine ran almost silently. A man stepped out of the car. He was elegantly dressed in a light summer suit, a perfect fit. His hair was neatly styled, and he carried an expensive leather briefcase. His gait was confident, his gaze appraising, but not arrogant. He looked like an emissary from a world Mia and Amy had thought was forever closed to them. Amy was the first to notice it from the window. "Mom, look at that beautiful car! Is someone visiting us?" Mia, who had been dusting, approached the window, her brows furrowed. There was no room for such visits in their new world. Her heart sank with alarm. Perhaps they were creditors, or Young Ho's men from his past life, come to finish off the fallen man. "Stay here," she quietly told Amy, putting down the rag. At that moment, there was a firm knock on the door, not harsh, but insistent. Mia straightened, ran her hands down her simple skirt, as if smoothing out invisible folds, and opened the door. A stranger stood in the doorway. As Mia approached, she saw that he was not young, perhaps 50, with an intelligent, insightful face. He smiled politely. "Mrs. Miller? Sorry to bother you. My name is Jason Reed. I'm an old business partner of Young Ho's. Can I speak for a moment?" His voice was low, calm, and inspiring confidence. Mia paused for a moment, then stepped back to let him in. He entered, his impeccable appearance contrasting even more sharply with the modest, albeit clean, furnishings. He glanced around the room, but his expression remained expressionless. "I know about the recent misfortunes that befell Chung Ho," he began, standing in the middle of the room without sitting down. "It's sad. He was a great man. But business is business. I didn't come to see him. I came to see you." Mia became wary, instinctively taking a step closer to Amy, who was peering curiously from behind her. "Me? Why?" "Because I believe the innocent shouldn't suffer for the mistakes of others," Jason said, opening the folder. "I have a proposition. It's straightforward. No strings attached. I can get you and your daughter out of here immediately. An apartment in a good neighborhood. Fully furnished. The best school for the girl. Financial support, so you don't have to work until you find your way. Essentially, a return to the standard of living I see you're accustomed to." He spoke smoothly, laying out the facts, like cards on the table. It sounded less like a dream than a concrete, achievable plan. "I admire your resilience," he continued, a note of seemingly genuine respect creeping into his voice. "But why? Why torture yourself and the child? This offer is a chance to start over, without debt. Without this," he made a slight gesture with his hand, encompassing the room, "this difficult past." Mia listened, her face stony. Inside, everything was seething. The offer was perfect, something she had never even dared to dream of. Salvation. For her and for Amy, separate from Young Ho and his ruin. "And what in return?" she asked coldly. "Nothing comes for free." Jason smiled softly. "In return, your safety and well-being. And, perhaps, your goodwill. I value loyalty. Someday, if I ask for a small favor involving your knowledge of some of Jong Ho's old dealings, you won't refuse. That's all." It was a trap disguised as manna from heaven. The actor's performance was flawless. He offered not just money, but a return to normalcy, to a dream, to a future for Amy. All she had to do was step away from the man she thought had lost them all. The final, most brutal test had begun. Mia listened to the end. Her face remained impassive, but inside, a storm raged. The offer was too perfect, too timely. It smelled not of help, but of a deal. And that key word, favor, linked to old business, ignited a red light within her. She had already learned too much about the world of Chung Ho to believe in the selfless help of old partners. She looked at Jason Reed, and her gaze became firm and clear. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Reed," she said calmly, without hesitation. "It is certainly generous, but I must decline." A look of genuine surprise crossed the actor's face. He clearly hadn't expected such a quick and decisive answer. "Mrs. Miller, please don't rush. Think about your daughter. Look around. This is no life for a child like her. She must have a future. Her future is with me, and with her family." Mia took a step forward, taking a defensive position between the stranger and Amy. "My place is here, with my husband, in good times and in bad. He's in a difficult situation right now, and I'm not going to abandon him. We can handle this on our own, without outside help, which could prove too expensive later." There was no pathos in her voice. There was a simple, irrefutable conviction. She wasn't simply refusing money. She was refusing a principle, to betray a man in need. And there was more dignity in that refusal than in all of Mr. Reed's elegance. At that moment, Amy, who had heard everything, emerged from behind her mother. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She stood next to Mia, her small face serious. She looked straight at the stranger, then took her mother's hand. "We're not going," she stated clearly. "We're staying with Uncle Young Ho. He's sad right now, and he needs us. And your apartment? It's empty, without him." Jason Reed leaned in, trying to speak to her at her level, using a soft, persuasive tone. "Baby, you want to go back to a beautiful house? With toys? With a garden? You want Mommy's hands to stop hurting from cleaning? Amy shook her head, her pigtails fluttering. I want Uncle Jung-ho to smile again. Mommy and I will make him a new garden, a small one, on the windowsill. And I will help him, like he helped us. Her words, so simple and childish, sounded like a final verdict on Jung-ho's plans and Jason's acting skills. The girl had chosen not comfort, but a person. She wasn't simply refusing a gift. She was offering her own, tiny but invaluable way of helping. In her world, values were set once and for all: family, loyalty, and teamwork. And this world proved stronger than all temptations. Jason Reed straightened. His friendly mask slipped momentarily, revealing the cold insistence of a professional tasked with a job he refuses to fail. He had decided to go all in. Mrs. Miller, please be reasonable. His voice lost some of its warmth, becoming more businesslike. You cling to the idea of family, but face the truth. Chung-ho is a broken man. His fortune cannot be repaired. You are condemning yourself, and most importantly, your daughter, to years of struggling to survive, to live within these walls. He gestured around the room again, and this time there was contempt in the gesture. Think of the mansion. Think of the silence, the space, the servants who catered to your every whim. Think of Amy running across the green lawn. This can be yours again. Today, without any buts. Are you truly willing to trade that for this? He spoke, drawing from his memory the most vivid, most compelling images of his past life. He appealed not to greed, but to nostalgia, to the desire to give the child the best. It was a powerful move. Mia listened, and for a second, pain flickered in her eyes. Yes, she remembered everything. And it was beautiful, but it was like a dream. And reality was here, the creaking chair, the smell of cheap food, the weariness in her bones. But reality was also her daughter's warm body next to her, and Jung-ho's quiet breathing at night on the next mattress, and their shared small victories over the clutter. I remember, she said quietly, and I am grateful for those days. But that was then. Now, our life is here. And, Mr. Reed, you are wrong. I will not trade one for the other. I choose my family, under any circumstances. This discussion is over. She walked to the door and opened it. The gesture was polite, but it brooked no argument. Her posture, her gaze, said, "Get out." Jung-ho's test had reached its climax and collapsed, shattering against the stone wall of her loyalty. The actor had nothing more to say. Jason Reed froze in the doorway. His professional smile had vanished completely. He saw not stubbornness, but unwavering determination in the eyes of the woman standing in the doorway of the squalid apartment. All his arguments, his artfully crafted image of benefactor, shattered by the simple and, for him, terrifying truth. He was not being bought here. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Miller, he said in a last attempt, but his voice already sounded flat, like a memorized phrase. A chance like this doesn't come around twice. Mia looked at him directly. There was no fear or uncertainty in her gaze. My choice has been made, and I ask you not to come again. We need nothing here, except peace. Goodbye, Mr. Reed. She didn't slam the door. She closed it quietly, firmly, with a certain final dignity. The click of the lock sounded like a full stop in the conversation, or perhaps even in the entire cruel game. Through the thin door, they heard his footsteps fade on the stairs, the soft slam of the car door, the deep rumble of the engine gradually fade into the distance. Silence fell over the apartment. Mia leaned her back against the door, closed her eyes, and exhaled. Only now did a slight shudder of tension run through her body. Amy came over and silently hugged her legs. Is he bad, Mom? She whispered. Not bad, Mia replied quietly, stroking her head. Just a stranger. And he has different rules. And we have ours. Jung-ho watched everything from around the corner of the neighboring building, where he stood after leaving for work. He saw the car pull up and the actor exit. He saw his apartment door open and close. The agency had provided him with a miniature listening device, and through an earpiece, he heard every sound, every word in the apartment. He heard Mia refuse, firmly, without pathos. He heard Amy say she wouldn't go without him. He heard the actor's final arguments and Mia's final, icy refusal. And he heard the silence that followed the car's departure. At first, a wave of such overwhelming pride washed over him that it took his breath away. They had chosen him, not luxury, not security, not an easy life. They had chosen him, broken and poor, in this filthy apartment. His test had yielded an absolutely unambiguous, brilliant result. They were his, unconditionally, but shame followed his pride like an avalanche, so crushing and heavy that he could barely stand. He had created this hell for them. He had forced them to scrub dirty floors, live in poverty, fight for every breath of fresh air. He had sent a tempter among them to test their loyalty, and they had come through it all with an honor he had never even dreamed of. He stood, his forehead pressed against the rough brick wall, feeling like the ultimate loser. He had received his proof, at the cost of their trust, their peace, their strength. His victory in this test was the most terrible defeat of his life. He realized that his doubts were more than just a mistake. They were an insult to those who truly loved him. That evening, he approached the door of his apartment, but couldn't bring himself to open it. His hand holding the key trembled. He felt like a fraud, a traitor about to be exposed. He spent the entire day wandering around the city, trying to find the strength for the final, most difficult step, confession. He opened the door. He was greeted not by the smell of dampness and despair, but by the warm, cozy aroma of cooking food. Somewhere, a stove was hissing. The room was clean. On the table stood the very same jar of wildflowers Mia had bought the other day. Amy, sitting on the floor, was busily drawing something. "Daddy's here!" she cried joyfully, using the very word that had been slipping into her speech more and more often in the last days in the mansion, and which now, in this kennel, cut him like a knife. Mia emerged from the tiny kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She wore a simple apron, a small smudge of flour on her cheek. She smiled at him, and in that smile there was such a natural, everyday joy at his return that his heart sank. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with ordinary concern. "Dinner's almost ready. Go wash your hands. There was even hot water in the sink today. Imagine that." He nodded, speechless, and walked into the bathroom. He looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink, at the man who had orchestrated this entire circus, who was now being greeted like a hero returning from a difficult day's work. He felt awkward, unbearably awkward. Every warm glance, every simple concern was now a reproach to him. He left, and they sat at the table. Simple food, simple conversation. Amy told him what she'd drawn. Mia asked how his day had gone. They created a cocoon of ordinary family happiness around him, unaware that their every word, every glance, made him burn with shame inside. He sat among them, feeling like the greatest liar in the world. It was time to end the performance. But he didn't know how to begin this confession. Entering the apartment, Jung-ho was stunned. During his absence, Mia and Amy had performed a small miracle, not the struggle against chaos of the first few days, but a transformation. The floors, washed to a shine, reflected the dim light from the window. Every surface sparkled with cleanliness. The air smelled not of dampness, but of freshness, soap, and something homey and edible that tickled the nostrils and made the mouth water. Plates and glasses were already set on the table, covered with a simple but clean tablecloth. In the center, in their glass jar, stood the very same wildflowers. Amy, seeing him, jumped up from the windowsill where she was gluing something and ran toward him. "Dad, look, Mom and I made this!" She grabbed his hand and led him to the table, where a homemade card lay made of colored paper. 3 figures were crookedly glued onto it, along with the inscription, "Our Apartment." It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was filled with so much care and pride that it took Jong-ho's breath away. Mia emerged from the kitchen, removing her apron. Her face was slightly flushed from the stove, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She smiled at him, and there wasn't a hint of weariness or despair in that smile. There was a calm satisfaction, almost happiness. "Everything's on time. Just finishing it. Go ahead, take a minute. Everything's ready." She didn't ask how his day had gone at his humiliating job. She didn't complain about the hardships. She simply rejoiced at his arrival, the way one rejoices at home when a loved one returns from work. This simple, warm welcome, in this poor but sparklingly clean room, became the most exquisite punishment for Chung-ho. They had created a home here, a real home, and he was the director of this spectacle of poverty. He felt dirty, false, undeserving of this cleanliness, these smiles. They sat down to dinner. The food was simple but delicious, prepared with obvious care. Mia talked about her small triumphs, finding cheap but good vegetables at the market, fixing a sticky kitchen faucet with a rubber band. Amy excitedly talked about her drawing, and how she and her mother hung curtains made from an old sheet. Jong-ho listened, nodded, tried to smile, but every laugh, Every satisfied glance at their comfortable life weighed more heavily on his conscience. He picked at his food with his fork, barely eating. A lump formed in his throat. Sitting here, under their loving gazes, knowing that all of this was a lie he had created, became unbearable. He saw their hands. Mia's, slightly reddened from the hot water and household cleaning products. Amy's small hands, also scratched from the care. They worked. They tried. They built their lives within these walls, sincerely believing in the necessity of it. And he watched it all like a spectator in a theater, appreciating the performance. "You're barely eating," Mia noted quietly, her brows furrowing slightly in concern. "Tired? Everything okay?" That simple question about his well-being, asked at a time when she herself was in the midst of an imaginary crisis, was the last straw. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't swallow this food. He couldn't accept this care. He couldn't look into their clear, trusting eyes. He slowly lowered his fork onto his plate. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. Amy stopped mid-sentence. "Mia!" She stopped eating, looking at him with growing anxiety. Jong Ho didn't look up. He stared at his hands, lying on the table on either side of his plate. Strong hands that could decide destinies, but now they trembled. I need to tell you something." His voice sounded hoarse, alien, "and I don't know how to begin, but I can't stay silent. Not a second longer." He took a deep, labored breath and raised his head. He met Mia's gaze. In her eyes, he no longer saw worry, but a premonition of something bad. Amy grew quiet, feeling the tension. "Everything that happened, everything that's been happening these last few days, it's a lie." He exhaled the words in one breath, as if pulling out a splinter. "Nothing was taken from me. The business is intact. Our house is ours. The money is still there. There was no collapse." A deafening, absolute silence fell over the room. Mia didn't move, didn't blink. She simply stared at him, and gradually her face began to change. The warmth and softness were gone. It became cold, stony, unfamiliar. What are you saying?" Her whisper was barely audible, but it already rang with ice. "I orchestrated it all," he continued, and now the words flowed like a torrent. A filthy torrent of confession. "This move, this apartment, I ordered Jin Woo to orchestrate it all, to create the appearance of a fall, to test you." He watched Mia slowly push her plate away. He saw her face turn pale, but he couldn't stop. "I thought you were used to luxury, that you took everything for granted. I needed to be sure that you weren't staying with me for the money, not for the house." But his voice broke. He couldn't pronounce the word love. It seemed blasphemous now. "So this was a test?" Mia's voice grew stronger, but there was no scream in it. There was a chill that pierced the bones. "All this filth, this horror, these days, our work, our efforts, was it all just a test for you?" "Yes," he whispered, lowering his head. "And today's man, Jason Reed, that was an actor. I hired him too, to offer you a way out, to see if you'd choose luxury without me." Now he looked at Amy. The girl sat, clutching her teddy bear, Yuri, to her chest. She looked at him with wide eyes, full of incomprehension and budding childish resentment. She didn't understand everything, but she sensed that something terrible and irreparable had happened. Mia asked, her voice trembling with some new acute emotion, humiliation perhaps. "Did you listen to me refuse him? To Amy and I saying we were staying with you?" Chung Ho nodded silently, unable to utter a word. His nod was the most terrible confession. Mia slowly rose from the table. She didn't look at him. She stared into space ahead, her face blank. "I thought we were going through hard times. I thought we were struggling together. I consoled our daughter, told her that the most important thing was that we were together. And you were just experimenting on us, like lab rats in a dirty cage." She spoke silently, almost in a whisper, but every word fell on him like the blow of a whip. He saw everything crumble, not the cardboard set of his performance, but the real, fragile, and beautiful thing they had begun to build here, with their own hands. And he himself was the one who brought the dynamite here. His test was complete. The result was clear, and it was catastrophic. The word experiment hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Mia stood, turned away, her shoulders tense as strings. She wasn't crying. It was as if the tears had frozen somewhere inside her, turning into sharp shards of ice. All her energy, all the tenacity with which she had fought for comfort in this apartment, had turned against her. She wasn't a strong woman, leading a family through hardship. She was a fool, diligently playing her part in someone else's cruel play. Amy glanced between her mother and young Ho. Her childish mind struggled to process the information. Test? Actor? They were complicated words, but she grasped the meaning with terrifying clarity. Uncle Jung Ho, who read her stories and to whom she gave her teddy bear, Uri, was actually deceiving them all this time, while they were cleaning, while she tried not to whine, while they dreamed of a windowsill garden together. He had been watching, not as a participant, but as an overseer. You didn't believe us? Amy breathed, her voice, so quiet and confused, sounding louder than any scream. This childish, direct question achieved what Mia's words had failed to. It pierced Jung Ho. He saw her face, always so open and trusting toward him, take on an expression of deep hurt and pain. The kind of pain when you're betrayed not by enemies, but by someone close to you. Her lower lip trembled, her eyes filled with tears, but she clenched her fists and did not cry. She waited for an answer. I wasn't doubting you. Jung Ho tried to wriggle out of it, but it sounded pathetic and false even in his own ears. I was doubting myself, that I was worthy. Stop it! Mia turned around sharply. A cold fire burned in her eyes. Don't make excuses. You doubted us. Our sincerity, our feelings. You decided we could only be with you for your money. And to prove yourself wrong, you staged this circus. You forced your daughter to sleep on a mattress on a dirty floor. You made me clean this stinking dump, believing I was saving our family from ruin. And all the while, you eavesdropped and peeped, pleased with how well your experiment was going. She spoke evenly, but every word was a honed blade. She laid bare the filthy undercurrent of his actions, and he had no retort. It was the pure truth. I felt so strong. Mia's voice suddenly wavered, a hint of that same pent-up pain breaking through. I thought we were going through this together, and would become even closer. And you were just monitoring the protocol. You watched us endure your artificial hell. And today, when that actor of yours came, God, I refused him so sincerely. I was so proud of our family, our loyalty at that moment, and that was just the last task in your test. She covered her face with her hands not to cry, but as if trying to erase the feeling of this humiliating spectacle. When she lowered her hands again, her face was tired and empty. All the energy, all the light that had burned within her these past few days had faded. All that remained was a deep, all-consuming disappointment. Amy slowly climbed down from her chair, walked over to her mother, and snuggled close. She looked at Jung Ho, not with anger, but with a profound sadness she couldn't even begin to understand. I gave you worry so you wouldn't be sad, she whispered. Were you just pretending to be sad? It was the final, precise blow. Jung Ho felt the ground slipping from under his feet. He didn't think, didn't calculate. His body reacted on its own. He stood up and his legs, always so sure-footed, buckled. He didn't sit down on the chair. He sank to his knees, right there, on the polished floor of their test apartment. The creaky parquet floor felt cold against his knees through the fabric of his trousers. The gesture was so unexpected, so out of keeping with the image of the always controlled Jung Ho, that Mia took a step back, and Amy quieted down, clinging to her mother. He didn't try to raise his head to meet their gaze. He looked at the floor, at the scratches they were trying to scrub away together. "Forgive me," he blurted out, his voice, always so even and commanding, breaking and trembling. "Forgive me. You have no idea how ashamed I am. Every look you've given me, every word you've said right now, I deserve this 1,000 times more." He spoke quietly, but with desperate sincerity, drawing out each word like a confession to a crime. "You're absolutely right. It was an experiment. A vile, cruel, selfish experiment of a coward, afraid to believe in his own happiness. I watched you get used to the house, to things, and I became afraid. It seemed to me that you fell in love not with me, but with the life I gave you. And instead of asking, talking, trusting, I decided to test everything, to create hell, to make sure you were angels. I had no right to do this. None." He finally raised his head. His eyes were dry, but there was such torment in them, such genuine agony, that Mia, despite all her resentment, involuntarily cringed. "I've been watching you all these days, and I saw something I didn't expect. I saw you create a home out of nothing. I saw your strength, your loyalty, your love for each other, and the more I saw it, the more I hated myself, because I realized I was destroying something real with my false decorations. Today, when you drove that man away, I understood everything. I got my answer, the best and most terrible answer, because it showed me who I could truly lose due to my stupidity and mistrust." He fell silent, swallowing hard. Then he looked at Amy. "Amy, you're asking if I was just pretending to be sad. No. At first, yes, it was an act. But then, looking at you and Mom, I became truly, truly sad. to the point of tears. Sad because I'm so stupid, and sad because I'm deceiving the best people in my life. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to hurt you or Mom. His voice, addressed to the girl, became very quiet and cracked. He didn't ask for forgiveness as a powerful boss. He asked it as a guilty man for whom their approval was incredibly important. Silence fell over the room again, but this time it was different. Tense, heavy, but not hostile. Shock and pain still hung in the air, but something else had emerged, the raw, unguarded sincerity of his remorse. Jung-ho didn't rise from his knees. He knew he had no right to do so until he'd spoken his mind. I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I don't deserve it, but I swear, I will do everything in my power to atone for this. Anything. Tell me, one wish, your deepest, greatest, or smallest wish, and I will grant it. Not as a purchase on forgiveness, as the first step, as an attempt to prove that I can be different. That I want to be worthy of you. He looked at Mia into her devastated eyes. You want me to disappear? I'll leave and never bother you again. You want everything back the way it was. In an hour, we'll be at the mansion, and you'll never hear of this apartment again. You want something impossible? I'll find a way. Just tell me, please. Give me a chance to fix something. Not for myself, for you. This wasn't manipulation. There was no calculation in his words. It was complete, utter surrender. He was handing them complete control. He offered to fulfill their every wish, knowing they might wish him gone, and he was willing to do so. Because the pain he saw in their eyes was worse than any loss. Mia was silent. She looked at him, this powerful man kneeling on the dirty floor, dirty from his own lies, and her heart was torn apart. On one hand, there was chilling resentment and betrayal. On the other, there was heartbreaking, naked remorse. She believed in his sincerity now. She believed that he was truly terribly ashamed, but faith didn't erase the pain. Amy tugged softly at her mother's sleeve. Mom, she whispered. Mia turned to her daughter and saw the same question in her eyes, the same mixture of pain and pity. Amy no longer looked at Jung-ho with the same adoration, but there was no hatred there either. There was confusion, and, as often happens with children, a desire for the big, terrible problem to simply disappear, for everything to go back to how it used to be. Mia's sigh was long and weary. Get up, she said quietly to Jung-ho. Kneeling on this floor. It's truly humiliating now, and not just for you. He rose slowly. His legs were numb, but he ignored it. He stood before them, waiting. To grant any wish, Mia said, with a slight, bitter smile. Do you really think everything can be bought or fulfilled? No, he answered honestly, but I don't know how else to start. How else to show that I understand everything? Mia closed her eyes. She had to make a decision. Throw him out? That would be fair. But she saw Amy, and she knew he was already family to her. Forgive him right away? It was impossible. The wound was too raw and deep. I have one wish, she finally said, opening her eyes. Her gaze was directed somewhere above his head. But it's not mine. She placed her hand on Amy's head. Ask her. Today, her faith in the man she trusted was taken away. Let her decide. What one wish could you grant her right now? To make her feel a little better. It was a wise and cruel move. It shifted the focus from their complex adult relationship to a simple, childlike world, and it gave Amy the strength that had just been taken from her. All eyes turned to the girl. Amy looked down in embarrassment, clutching Yuri in her arms. She was thinking. Then she looked up at Jung-ho, and there was still a hint of hurt in them. I want you to never lie to me again. Never, ever. Not me, not Mom, even if you're scared or sad. Promise? It wasn't a material desire. It was a desire for honesty, the simplest and the most difficult. Jung-ho felt his throat tighten. He dropped to one knee in front of her, to be on her level. I promise, he said, looking straight into her eyes. Never. That's my word. To you. And if I break it, you have every right to never speak to me again. Amy looked at him for a long moment, studying him, searching for any falsehood. Then she nodded slowly. Okay. This okay wasn't forgiveness. It was a truce, a first tiny step. Jung-ho knew the path to redemption would be long and difficult, but this first step, this childish demand for the truth, was more precious to him than any vows. He realized his test was over. Now their test had begun. A test of his ability to be honest, to be real, to be worthy of the family he himself had. cast into doubt. After Amy's quiet but meaningful okay, an awkward silence filled the apartment. Resentment and pain still hung in the air, mingling with the fatigue and tension from the difficult confessions just made. Mia stood, hugging herself, her gaze fixed on the empty space outside the window, the gray evening of the poor neighborhood. She didn't know what to do next. The words had been spoken. The remorse had been offered, but the gap in trust gaped too wide. Jong Ho still knelt before Amy, hesitating to rise. As if his posture were the only correct one in the situation, he waited, waiting for any sign, even the slightest indication of where to go. His offer to grant any wish still hung in the air, and Amy had only partially taken it up, extracting a promise of honesty. It was Amy who broke the silence. She looked at her mother, then at Jong Ho, and in her eyes, beyond the residual sadness, a spark of a long-forgotten dream glimmered. "Mom, remember how we used to look at magazines at the library? There were pictures of big blue waters and white sand, and palm trees. You said that's what they call the sea." Mia slowly turned her gaze to her, as if returning from distant thoughts. She nodded, unsure where her daughter was leading. "And there were mountains, really high, with white peaks. Snow," Amy continued, her voice growing slightly more animated, "and houses on the water. You said that someday, when I grew up, I could see all this. If I really wanted to." She paused and turned to Chung Ho. "You said any wish. My deepest wish is to see everything. The sea, the mountains, the houses on the water. Not in a picture, in reality. At least, just for a glimpse. May I?" This wasn't a request for an expensive toy or a return to the mansion. It was a request for a miracle, for an experience, for the beauty of the world that lives in childhood fantasies and on the tattered pages of magazines. There was no calculation in her request, no desire to prove anything or gain material benefit. There was a pure childish thirst for magic that suddenly broke through this adult nightmare of deception and testing. Jong Ho looked at her, a new wave of emotion washing over him. Not shame this time, but something warm and bitter. At the same time, he had destroyed her small, well-ordered world, and in response, she asked him not to rebuild the walls, but to open a window onto a vast, beautiful world. "We can," he breathed out, his voice full of determination. "We can see everything, the sea, the mountains, the houses on the water, not just with one eye, with two." And for a long time, he looked at Mia, seeking not permission, but understanding. He didn't dare decide anything for her now. "Mia," he asked quietly, Do you support this desire?" Mia looked at her daughter for a long time, at her animated, hopeful face. Everything inside her still ached with resentment and betrayal. The thought of going anywhere with him now seemed absurd and painful, but she saw more than just a whim in Amy's eyes. She saw a lifeline. For all of them, this trip could become that clean slate, a space, free from associations with lies and dirty apartments. A place where there would be neither the mansion nor this kennel. There would be only them and the big, unfamiliar world. She took a deep breath, feeling something breaking inside her, something new, fragile, trying to break through. "Yes," she said quietly but clearly. "I support it. It's a good wish. Let's just go away. Somewhere. Far away." Her words, "let's just leave," sounded like a sentence to everything that had happened, and like the beginning of something new. It wasn't her agreement to immediate forgiveness, but to try, an attempt to start over somewhere else, where the memory of his deception wouldn't haunt them in every corner. The decision, once made, was executed with the lightning-fast efficiency that Jong Ho was capable of when unfettered by his own doubts. But this time, that efficiency was aimed not at control, but at fulfilling a desire. He didn't go to the mansion. He made just one call to Jin Woo, who, judging by the voice on the other end, was already aware of the failure of Operation Zeroing and was expecting any orders, no matter how harsh. Gather the bare essentials for 3 people for an indefinite period. Warm and light clothing, documents. A car will be sent to this address in an hour, and find us a place, somewhere with both the sea and the mountains, so we can fly immediately, today. There was no longer the same authority in his voice. There was only urgency and complete focus on the task at hand. He didn't explain, didn't justify himself. Jin Woo, accustomed to clear orders, simply replied, "It will be done," and the connection was lost. The next hour in the small apartment passed in a strange, surreal bustle. Jong Ho helped them pack the few things they'd brought. Mia did everything silently, automatically. She folded her simple clothes, carefully wrapped the jade hairpin, the very same amulet from another life, in cloth, and placed it at the bottom of her bag. It was an unconscious gesture that spoke louder than words. She wasn't renouncing her entire past. She was taking with her what was valuable. Amy, on the other hand, was excited. She ran around the room, helping as best she could, asking questions. Are we going to fly on a plane? Will there be other kids there? Will we see dolphins? Her childish ability to live in the present moment began to overcome her resentment. The upcoming adventure eclipsed the pain of yesterday. Exactly an hour later, a discreet but roomy SUV pulled up outside. Jinwoo arrived in person, his face impassive. He helped load the luggage, casting a quick, appraising glance at his boss, but asking no questions. Young-ho merely nodded. Take me to the airport. The fastest flight to the right destination. They got into the car, Mia and Amy in the back seat, Young-ho next to Jinwoo. No one looked back at the gray house that had become the scene of a cruel experiment. It was left behind, like a nightmare. Waiting for them at the airport was a ticket to some distant, warm archipelago, where mountains descended directly to the ocean and bungalows stood over the water. Their tickets were first class, but this time Mia didn't pay attention. She simply held Amy's hand and looked out the terminal's huge windows at the runways. She felt less like a passenger than a fugitive, fleeing from herself, from her feelings, from an insurmountable situation. Jong-ho didn't barge in. He gave them space. He organized the party, received documents from Jinwoo, and led them to the boarding gate. His silent, unobtrusive concern in those moments was more eloquent than any apology. As the plane lifted off, Amy was glued to the window, gasping with delight. Mia stared into the same dark abyss, dotted with the lights of the receding city, and felt something heavy lingering beneath her, along with the earth. The burden of resentment, anger, and humiliation hadn't gone away, but now she didn't have to carry it every day within familiar walls. She could leave it there, below. Jong-ho sat in the chair next to them, but not next to them. He left an empty space between them, a physical distance he didn't dare cross. He looked at Mia's profile in the dim light of the car, at her hand resting on the armrest, and understood that the journey that had begun was not a vacation. This was a new kind of test, a test of his patience, his ability to simply be there, without demanding, without checking, without controlling. A test of whether he could give her the time and space to let the wound heal, even a little. They were flying into the unknown. They didn't know what the hotel would be like, what awaited them tomorrow, or how long they would stay in this new place. But there was a strange freedom in this uncertainty. There was no past to weigh on their shoulders. There was only the present, the hum of the engines, the warm blanket on their lap, their daughter falling asleep by the window, and the woman whose silence was now both a punishment and the only possible dialogue for him. The plane climbed, breaking through the clouds. Somewhere up ahead, morning awaited them in an unfamiliar land, a morning that could begin a new page, still blank, without text, and only the three of them could decide what would be written on it, a new chapter in an old story with the same mistakes, or the beginning of an entirely new book. Jong-ho looked out the window into the darkness and made a silent vow to himself, a vow to write this new page with them, honestly, day after day, starting tomorrow morning, with the first ray of sun on a strange warm sea.